Okay, here's your icebreaker question for today. Where did you go to school and how do you learn best? Where did you go to school and how do you learn best? Talk about that with your group, and when you're ready to continue, you can press play for the Bible study. We're in a series entitled Love Letters to remind ourselves that the books that we're looking at in the Bible right now are in fact letters. They are epistles. That's the fancy name that you'll hear in many churches. An epistle simply means letter. And the letter we're looking at right now is the letter to the Hebrews that we kicked off last week. Now, as we're looking at this particular letter, what we're seeing is that the writer of Hebrews is writing to a group of people who are either Jewish right now or they are Christians and they came from a Jewish background. And in all cases, what the writer is trying to do is to help us to see that we should not be surprised by the claims of Jesus, that he is in fact the one that God had told us about ahead of time, and that there are many, many scriptures that point to Jesus. Scriptures for a Jewish person would be referring to what we call the Old Testament. And so we started off by seeing that Jesus is far more than a prophet. We saw that last week. He's even more than just a Messiah king who will rule, but he is also far greater than the angels. We saw all of that last week. And this week, as we go into the passage, what we see is that the writer starts to shift to not just not the greatness of Jesus, but the humility and the willingness of Jesus to become like us, to become human being. And so this whole section, with chapter 2 going into the beginning of chapter 3, is looking at Jesus as a human being. Now, rather than follow the scriptures that we have in the book of Hebrews, and I encourage you to do that, you can look at Sunday's sermon, or you can read the section that I have outlined on your piece of paper there. Look that up in your own Bibles to read it through. But I just have one verse that is pulled out of this whole section that says that he calls us brothers and sisters. And I want you to just think about, to consider the humanity of Jesus, what it is that God gave up to become like one of us. One of the things that I have is a passage there from a gospel that it outlines Jesus as a young boy when he's a preteen teenager. And as he gets left behind by his parents accidentally, what they find when he comes back is that he's in the temple and he is learning. He has great wisdom for somebody his age, but what you see in this passage is that that he is not being Jesus the Great One, Jesus God in the flesh, but Jesus person, human being, someone who is learning, is asking questions, is figuring out the scriptures, is diving into the scriptures with the experts of his day. And it says at the end of that passage that he went home and was obedient to his parents, as the law says he should, and that he grew in wisdom and in stature. I'd like for you to read this passage and to just think about that and talk about that a little bit. How does that affect your picture of Jesus when you think about him as a person who is growing in wisdom, which means he's learning more and he is getting better in his relationship with God and with people, and stature, which means he's growing up and getting bigger and older and stronger and becoming an adult. So read that section, even though there's only one verse from Hebrews there. and just consider the humanity of Jesus, one as someone who calls us brothers and sisters. Read that, talk about that. When you're ready to continue, press play. Discussion today is on our own Bibles. Jesus grew in wisdom and stature, and part of the growing in wisdom was that he read the scriptures, he learned the scriptures, he discussed them with experts of his day, and that is how he grew in wisdom. As I've been going through the letters up to this point in time, I've been using different translations all the way through and trying to explain some of the differences with the English translations that we have. Our Bibles are not in the original language. The original language for the Old Testament is Hebrew, and for the book of Daniel, Aramaic. We also have the New Testament, which was originally written in Greek. And so our Bibles are all translations. And they are translations that some of which have been around for hundreds of years, and some of which have been around for as little as 2 years. And so what I have is a list of the translations or the translation families that we went through since the beginning of the book of Colossians all the way up through now. I'm going to stop introducing translations at such a fast pace from here on out. I'll most likely be using ones that are in this list. If I end up using something that's different, I'll explain why and include that on the list at the time. But for now, this gives us plenty to work with. These translations came about, many of them, after the Dead Sea Scrolls were found and then analyzed, and then the findings from that included in the Greek and Hebrew texts that we're working with to translate. That kicked off a lot of the translations. 1940s and 1950s were when the Dead Sea Scrolls were found and analyzed, and then you see these translations starting in the 1960s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and continuing on. What you also find is you look at the list as a list, which I have on your piece of paper there or on your screen if you're watching online, is that these translations, you start to see a tension, if you will, in terms of style of translation and what it is that they were trying to accomplish. The translations at the top of the list are ones that are trying to be true to the original Greek and Hebrew, sometimes in a word-for-word fashion, and they're translating it into English, but they're okay if the English is a little glunky and difficult to read, because they're trying to keep it very close to the original language without adding interpretation for you. The ones down toward the bottom of the list are in smoothing out the English, making it easier to read, and as a result, they are interpreting sections and passages and verses for you in order to smooth it out and translate the meaning. By the time you get to the bottom, they're just paraphrasing the meaning with very little tie it's to the original language structure, the original words and the original sentence structure. So I've introduced most of these already over the course of the past couple of months. And so now my question for you as you look at this is simply this. Do you have your own Bible? And what translation did you choose? And why did you choose that translation? Why did you choose that Bible for yourself? If you don't have one yet, what do you think you would like? What kind of translation do you think you would like? And my encouragement is, again, that you get one for yourself that is your own, so that you can take notes, you can keep it for yourself, you can even pass it down from generation to generation to your children and to your grandchildren, so that they can see how important it is for you that you wanted to walk together with God. My prayer for you, for all of us, is that we will, just like Jesus, grow in wisdom, that we will learn God's Word, apply it to our lives, accurately understand it and interpret it. And so I'm praying for you, I'm praying for me, that we will grow in wisdom as we learn and apply God's Word to our life. And I want to ask you, as you pray for one another, that you'll pray for me also, that I will grow in wisdom, and that we will continue to walk with the Lord and help others to do the same. God bless.